Good evening. I declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the 26th of August 2025 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:32 p.m. Welcome councillors, staff, members of the public and the media. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of this land, and I recognise their ongoing connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco. Now, attendances, we've got Councillor Simon White on approved leave. We have Councillor Mark Burns as a late apology. Councillor Nicola Johnston attending electronically with prior permission from the Mayor, and all other councillors present in person, so welcome to all of you. And we've got a full complement of our ELT with a number of staff on hand to assist as well, so good evening to all of you. Councillors, are there any leave requests for the next meeting? Nope. Any disclosures of interest? Nicola, Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you. I submitted it previously, so I don't know if I have to read it again. We voted on it last meeting.
Okay, if it's already approved, then there's nothing left to do this evening. There were no public questions taken on notice, so we'll move straight to public question time. Diane Twigg of Bagot Road, Subiaco. A question from you, Ms. Twigg.
Thank you. I actually submitted two questions related to item C5 on the agenda. The first question was, what was the total number of dogs registered in the City of Subiaco? Do you want me to read the second one? Yes. Okay. And the second question is, what is the number of dogs registered to households in the Central Ward of Subiaco?
Thanks for the questions. Director of Technical Services.
Thank you for your question. So in response to your first question, the city has 2,449 registered dogs. And in relation to your second question, it's estimated that there's 1,100 dogs in the Central Ward based on registered dog data by suburb.
Thank you. There were no more public questions submitted, so we'll move to public statements now. We've got two public statements. We'll begin with item C1. Peter McDonald of Onslow Road, Shenton Park.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. This is in relation to LPPs 1.1 and 1.2. As someone involved in the community consultation leading up to the original passage of the LPPs in February 2021, I have, as you know, over recent weeks asked some questions to determine whether these changes could potentially be adverse for low-density homes. I can't find any instances where homeowners will be materially better off or worse off under the planning code compared to where they are at present under the proposed changes. The very prompt same day in many cases and detailed turnaround to the recent questions I've asked on the LPPs is a credit to the city. Thank you very much for that. The expressed intent of these amendments at the 29 April OCM this year is to update the LPPs to align with the new R codes and to improve clarity and readability, but without altering the intent or objectives. It's appreciated these amendments have to be turned around through WAPC, at least for 1.1, and then finalised before next April, necessarily limiting time for wider review. However, when time and circumstances permit, such as by any potential future LPS 5 amendment, our group in the community does have some aspirations for further changes, and these are, firstly, harmonising side and rear setbacks for the development site upper floors for the abutting or common boundary cases versus the adjoining or over the lane cases when measured from the low density site boundary, so that the adjoining cases are no better or worse off than the abutting cases for the upper floor setbacks. And in the papers you've got is a little sketch I've made showing the difference between the over the lane cases and the abutting cases. Those cases are now well clarified by virtue of the clarifications in these amendments as to which situations are abutting and which are adjoining. And number two, harmonising the protections provided via LPS 5 to low-density sites abutting or adjoining high-density sites in local centres, with the protections available for low-density sites abutting or adjoining high-density sites that are subject to 1.2. And 3, further review to ensure that the low-density site protections provided in the proposed LPP 1.1 in the case of the R60 sites, which as you recall been moved into 1.1, are at least as good as the protections that used to be provided in 1.2 in the case of the R60 sites before the introduction of the medium density code last year. That's the statement. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr McDonald. Okay, a statement on C5, the off-lead fenced dog park petition from Diane Twigg.
Thank you. As the petition to council identified, there is not an appropriate off-lead dog park to service the needs of Central Ward dog owners and nearby residents. The current assigned off-lead dog park at the Palms is situated next to the busy roads and intersections of Rockaby and Nicholson Road, which is contrary to the requirements for off-lead dog parks identified in the report from the Director of Technical Services. There is open lawn leading directly to the busy intersection, posing a significant traffic risk not only to dogs but also small children who may use the area. Residents are also seeking an off-lead dog park that is within walking distance of residents who live in the area, in the central area, enhancing both their and their dogs' physical and mental health and improving the sense of community, something Subiaco prides itself on and the reason many choose to live in the area. One of the benefits of dog ownership is to also help the owner exercise walk, and the suggestion residents should drive to other councils' fenced dog parks does not fit well with the community values of living in Subiaco. In addition, as identified in the document Unleashed, a Guide for Successful Dog Parks, 2 in every 3 homes in Australia have at least one pet. When you consider that the lot sizes are getting smaller and the census data showing an increase in apartment living, pets need to be catered for in the parks and other public spaces. In recognition of the proposed public open space review, an interim compromise would be to identify an off-lead area within the Central Ward, for example a part of Subiaco Theatre Gardens, or address the safety concerns of the Palms off-lead park by providing some fencing to the corner of the Palms that face Rockaby Road and the open section of Nicholson Road, similar to that at Rankin Road Park. In the longer term, as part of the public open space review, I urge Council to consider specific inclusion and identification of suitable off-lead dog parks to meet the longer term needs of resident dog owners. As such, I hope Council would support a recommendation to staff that enclosed dog parks are considered holistically across the city as part of the upcoming public open space review, with further direction from Council that a suitable central location for an off-lead dog park be identified as part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you for the statement. There were no petitions or approved deputations submitted for this evening, so councillors, I'll ask you to confirm minutes of previous meetings. We've got the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of the 29th of July 2025. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Kosovich and Councillor Jones, thank you. We will vote on a show of hands for this and every other item. All those in favour? Okay, great. That's carried unanimously, which means 7-0 this evening. Okay, announcements by the presiding member, and it's an interesting crossroads that we find ourselves at this evening. It's the last ordinary council meeting before we go into the council caretaker period. So what does all that mean? Well, not as much as you might first think. All year we've known that there were local government elections coming towards the end of this year, and all year we have done things as a council, as a city, just as calmly and smoothly as ever. And the year before that, and the year before that, though arguably a bit better and a bit more effectively and efficiently each year as working relationships have improved and ways of doing business have developed. Looking forward, the work will not stop through September and into October. Our regular program of weekly strategic workshops and briefings will continue. The countless discussions, communications and correspondence, both internally and with external stakeholders, will continue, and so it should. All that changes is that tonight is the last ordinary council meeting at which we can pass significant resolutions. But tonight it does seem fitting to present to you a short video. I've had no editorial or creative input into this, and it's entirely the work of our communications team, though probably with oversight of our chief videographer to my left here. He wears a number of hats at this organisation. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised as you each look back at and are reminded of what the city has achieved over the last couple of years. Under the leadership of this council. I'm not sure if we call it the class of 2023 or the class of 2025, but again, the man to my left coined the phrase, so ask him over dinner later perhaps. My thanks to the CEO, ELT and all staff for actually doing the work. It's times like this when the rubber hits the road that we're really quite thankful for the principle of noses in, fingers out when it comes to good governance. Thank you to all of you. I do feel in some ways the video should come with a disclaimer. That council is far from just delivering vibrancy and activation events and rejuvenation. It's a commitment every Tuesday night and some weeks even more than that as well until the day that you retire. It's a serious business. It's heavily regulated and our organisations are complex and our communities are complex as well. So a video like this can only ever be the tip of the iceberg, but it's one I think you'll all enjoy. So I think this video is going to be uploaded to the city's YouTube account, just like the video from 2 years ago. And when you get home, or for those at home, I'm going to channel my 7-year-old boy Charlie now when I say please watch, like and subscribe and leave comments below. So now I'll cue the video, please, governance team. Okay, you can clap if you want, otherwise we'll just move on. But thank you to Rory from Comms and well done to all concerned. Okay, now we better get into the serious part of the meeting. We've got a number of reports this evening, councillors, and some of those may be suitable for an en bloc vote on the basis that there's no special voting requirements and there's no amendments or alternatives submitted in relation to those items. So the possible en bloc vote I've got in front of me would consist of items C1, C2, C3, C4, C7 and confidential agenda item 13.1. Councillors, did anyone wish to remove any of those items from the en bloc vote? Didn't I say 13.4? Oh, 13.4, yep. 13.1 is not able to be carried on block, but 13.4 is. Do I have anyone wanting to remove any of those items? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Member Mullen, I'd like to pull C3. Climate Change Response Plan.
Yep, it's pulled. Councillor Powell. C1's gone, so that leaves C2, C4, C7 and 13.4. Councillor Johnston.
I'd like to withdraw the EMM.
Okay, well, thank you. Back On the on-block item, just confirming it would be C2, C4, C7 and 13.1. 13.4. I'm not really sure what the EMM has to do with C5. No, the EMM relates to something completely different. Okay, well, look, I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the remaining on block vote. That's C2, C4, C7 and 13.4. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Jones, thank you. All those in favour? All right, the on block vote is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And for those watching, that means that the items just mentioned, C2, C4, C7 and 13.4 are carried as recommended by our staff without amendment. So now we'll make our way through the remaining agenda items. Okay, Councillor C1, Modified Local Planning Policies 1.1 and 1.2. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Kosovic and Councillor Powell, thank you. Okay, I didn't realise there was a code that meant that you could move, but if Councillor Kosovic is willing to let you move, I'm happy to do that. I saw his hand go up first.
I'm moving to approve the officer recommendation.
Yep. Are you I mean, we're getting into territory that I think most people shouldn't need to concern themselves with, but did you want to speak to the officer recommendation or just speak, well, support it or just speak to the item generally?
I will be supporting it, but...
Okay, look, if there's a but coming, Councillor Powell, I saw Councillor Kosovic's hand go up first. He will speak, from what I gather from what his body language a couple of seconds ago, in favour of the officer recommendation. You can second, and we'll hear you very shortly after Councillor Kosovic. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Please let me begin by acknowledging and thanking our planners for the significant workload they have undertaken in responding to community concerns over the past month, in particular with this agenda item. At the July 2025 Ordinary Council meeting, Council deferred finalising the modified local planning policies, LPP 1.1 and LPP 1.2. Since that time, the report has been updated with additional details on the use of terms such as density interface, interface area and abutting. These changes were made in response to public submissions to help clarify the intent and operations of policies without altering the planning controls. Local Planning Policy 1.1 amends the provisions of the Residential Design Codes, which requires West Australian Planning Commission approval of the policy. Given the updates and extensive clarifications made, it is recommended that Council proceed with LPP 1.1 and LPP 1.2 with modifications to address issues raised in submissions as per the officer recommendations. Accordingly, I recommend that Council proceed with local planning policies LPP 1.1 and LPP 1.2 with modifications to address issues raised in submissions as per the officer recommendation. 2, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to finalise LPP 1.1 pending approval from the West Australian Planning Commission. Once the West Australian Planning Commission approves LPP 1.1, the policy can be implemented, providing clarity and consistency for residential development within the City of Subiaco. I commend the officer recommendation to you.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor. Look, the reason why I brought it down largely was because that's our tradition when we have interested members of the public attend the council meeting about a certain item. I think I think fairly regularly. Look, I'd like to give some context to tonight's debate about our local planning policies. As I was here when the original LPPs were brought to the council, and I remember some of the tough debate over the wording of the policies. I think so would you, Mayor, and so would Councillor De Vries, who were both here at the same time. I even recall why they were needed. It followed the state government's forced imposition of high-density zoning immediately abutting residential R15 and R20 zones. And we were told by the government to develop our own local planning policies to ameliorate the effect of that decision. And look, I recall hundreds of hours of work of the dedicated community members and staff as they tried to come up with appropriate local policies and protections. It was all a bit of a pressure cooker trying to get these policies out before an expected wave of new development applications. So it's no surprise that here and there things could have been done better. But overall in the circumstances it was a good effort. Now the state government wants to change some of the rules again in regard to how building height is regulated and incorporating medium density into the residential R1 codes. And that's the reason for the sea of red and the track changes of the policies. And we've got until April to make those changes, so again there is time pressure. But it's also enabled a 5-year review of what are complex and detailed planning policies. Now, staff have identified a number of changes to tidy up, improve and clarify those policies. And after public consultation, that's led to some more changes, which I think is good. Staff and community listening to each other and what is involved into a pretty thorough investigation of these policies. And for those who remember the uproar over LPS 5, I was pleased to see a detailed but respectful examination carried out largely outside the public eye and without the pressure cooker that sometimes creates. And I think that it's important to note that sometimes small changes can affect amenity and property values, and that's why some of this can become so contentious. Now, I also note that one of the keenest community eyes on the process, Mr Peter McDonald, who spoke here tonight, said after his examination of the proposed amendment, and I think fellow EMs are well aware of how many questions he has asked, that he'd formed the view that there was no evidence of any properties being adversely affected. And look, I'm pleased to see that because that's in line with my own findings and that's why I'm supporting the officer recommendation. Although I confess I only looked at my ward, Shenton Park, because it was potentially one of the most affected, I couldn't find any properties adversely affected by the proposed changes. That's not to say there aren't any, but I couldn't find any. And it's also consistent with what the staff have said. So perhaps the community can take some confidence that the local planning policies, these amendments have been thoroughly scrutinised by staff, by the community and by the council. And so far it appears nobody's found any losers. Look, I think it's also good that the community consultation raised some aspirational changes that some community members would like to see in any future reviews, goals that can be put on an agenda to further improve the LPPs, and surely that's a win for community involvement. And finally, look, I'm going to conclude with the observation that so far the LPPs haven't really been fully tested. The expected building boom did not eventuate because of a downturn in the building industry. But they will be tested when life comes back into that part of the economy, and let's hope they are not only fit for purpose, but given due regard by planning authorities and decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any speakers against? Okay, I'll take speakers for or against. Councillor De Vries.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. It's been a really interesting month for seeing how council does what we do best, which is listen to our community, listen to concerns from elected members, and work together with staff who've given us enormous support in this process to build a really great understanding of what the issues are. And I really want to thank everyone who was involved in that. I mean, it started with the adjoining and abutting terminology. We had to seek legal advice. That problem was pretty much wrapped up once we received that. I mean, it didn't initially concern me, but the more we talked about it, the more concerned I became. And again, when community members come back with their concerns, we do need to listen. And I saw so much evidence, as Councillor Powell pointed out, that staff responded almost immediately and were most willing to provide the necessary reassurance to the community, which leads me to say, why is the community so invested? And as Councillor Powell and I both know, people in the community, Mr. Peter MacDonald and others, did tremendous amount of work to put together policies that would protect, local planning policies that would protect our community as best they could after LPS 5 changed the whole entire face of our city. And I think that's where it comes from. It's hundreds of hours of work. It's not just people having a passion project. It's hard work. And that should be recognised. So again, I'd like to thank Mr. MacDonald for coming tonight and making his statement. And I know how much time he's spent investigating this issue. And finally, I think, again, as Councillor Powell's pointed out, and I just want to reiterate that, it's great to see that there's areas for improvement, and that's been acknowledged by the city, and we'll work towards that. And I think, again, we welcome the participation of our community. So I do, of course, hope that these changes are approved by the WAPC and that we move forward to better protect our community for the future. It is important, and it's important work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Matt McMullen. Planning is fiendishly complicated, with multiple layers of laws and policies to take into consideration, and it can be very confusing, and this item has certainly taxed my comprehension. I want to thank the community, and particularly Peter MacDonald, for raising the issues, and also staff for all their work answering the multiple questions that have been flying around. What should have been a relatively straightforward, as far as anything in planning is straightforward, number of changes to bring our LPPs into line with changes that were made at the state level to the R codes, otherwise they'd become non-compliant, became seemingly a lot more complicated because the updates provided an opportunity to clarify and thereby improve the wording of the LPPs, clarification that was requested through much valued community feedback. And in planning, words matter greatly. Words and terms have specific meanings, but one of the key terms in our LPPs had not actually been defined, the word abutting. Adding that definition led to a realisation that the words abutting and adjoining had been used interchangeably, and so a further tidy up has been proposed. And that's what raised the concerns that changing the word adjoining to abutting throughout the LPPs would water down the mechanisms they contain to mitigate the impact of medium and high density development next to low density. And as Councillor Powell has said, those mitigations were a key response to the decision Council took in the local planning scheme that higher density would not be buffered by transition zones. And that means that more of our low density character areas that define Subiaco can be retained. But it also means that in a small number of areas, low density is right up against that higher density. It's clear to me that in talking about the density interface, which is that critical term where the low and high densities come together, the LPPs were always intended to apply to abutting properties, that is, ones that share a common boundary. And that's most strongly indicated by the diagrams in the policies. I'm therefore comfortable that the clarification to the terminology and adding in that definition doesn't change the way that higher density development will be considered, and no properties are worse off than before, and I'm glad I've come to the same conclusion as others. As part of the consultation on this issue, the community's raised concerns about the impact of development on properties across laneways, and I really hope that we can look at whether there's anything that can be done in that space in future conversations.
Thank you. Councillors, any other speakers? All right, I will invite the mover to close. I'll put the item to the vote. All those in favour of agenda item C1? All right, it's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, gallery. Okay. Okay, C2 was carried on block, so we'll move to C3, which was pulled from the on block. We've got the officer recommendation in respect to the climate change response plan. No amendments or alternatives. I will look for a mover and a seconder for C3. Councillor O'Connor, thank you. Councillor De Vries, thank you. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. In calling for this one to be debated, I think I'm challenging my inner Councillor White, who's not here, because I really wanted to acknowledge the work that's gone into updating our climate change response plan, and that's such a significant area of concern in our community. It's gratifying to see in the plan how much the city as an organisation has managed to achieve under our previous plan, with some really significant reductions in emissions. But there's obviously more work that can be done to drive down emissions even further. And while we're just one local government, we know that these incremental small changes gradually add up to significant changes at a global level. It's been particularly gratifying to see how many responses there were to the draft plan from the community and the constructive suggestions for additions. And I really just want to take this opportunity to thank those people for taking the time to be engaged. It's really good to see that actions have been added to the plan that address those submissions. And I feel it's a really good example of the importance of community consultation and people being engaged. So thank you to all those people.
Councillor De Vries.
Of course, this is just an echo of what Councillor O'Connor said, but of course I support the adoption of the Climate Change Response Plan. Adopting this plan with the recommended modifications ensures Subiaco demonstrates leadership on climate action, prioritises real emissions reductions and delivers long-term environmental, social and financial benefits for our community. This plan not only meets our legislative obligations under the Local Government Act, but also positions Subiaco to demonstrate leadership on climate action, to mitigate future risks and to deliver tangible benefits for our community. And as was mentioned, we received a lot of community feedback on this issue, demonstrating the community's concern about the environment and what we're doing and how we're working to ensure that we get the best outcomes. It was largely supportive, but some points were raised about the reliability of offsets and the importance of aligning timing of community action plans. So yes, I fully support the officer recommendation, commend the work that's been done, and I know that this is going to be a growing area of concern for our community, and I'm sure that the city is going to continue to work hard on behalf of the community to look for ways to improve this in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, I'll look to the mover to close, if you wish. I'll call the vote. All those in favour of C3. C3 is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. C4 was carried on block. We'll move to C5, the off-lead fence dog park petition. We've got the officer recommendation, which everyone's familiar with, and an amendment submitted by Councillor Johnston. I will start with the officer recommendation and see if there's a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Kosovich, thank you. Councillor De Vries, thank you. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. The City of Subiaco has received a petition from a resident of Barker Road, which effectively is from 115 residents from 94 properties within Subiaco, requesting an off-leash fenced dog park. After careful deliberation, the nub of the officer recommendation is that this proposal is not supported in Central Ward due to critically important factors such as insufficient passive green space or passive space and a lack of a suitable location. Also, there is an apparent requirement to consider enclosed dog parks as part of the upcoming public open space review, which needs to be evaluated across the city in a holistic manner. At an estimated cost of $200,000 to establish the dog park, we will also need to ask whether this cost is reasonable in the circumstances and whether it represents value for money to ratepayers. Moreover, there is the issue of competing public space priorities, which has been significantly impacted by the state government's Subi East redevelopment project. This will bring with it higher density requirements and substantial population growth by 2036. That in real terms will continue to put pressure on both active and passive recreational space availability across the city. Given the complexity of this issue, it has been recommended that enclosed dog parks be holistically considered across the city as part of the upcoming public open space review. This approach will enable the city to identify optimal locations and design solutions that balance the need of dog owners with the overall recreational requirements of the community. For these reasons, I commend the officer recommendation to you.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. This evening we heard from a resident who rightly points out that we are a community of dog owners, and that is something positive that we do really support. And I think there's sufficient evidence to see that the City of Subiaco fully supports and encourages positive outcomes for dogs and owners as much as possible. And that's where we're really coming from here with a holistic review. We're looking at balancing and weighing up the different priorities of our community, not just in terms of how much we give to a dog owner, how much we give to young people. We've known the difficulties and the problems we face with the lack of open, green and active spaces for young people to do sport. We know the challenges of, having safe places for elderly people to come and rest in a park. These are really difficult challenges that we face, which is why I really do support this holistic approach rather than trying to just narrow and do a micro focus on a key issue, which is an important issue and it's not to be dismissed, and that won't be dismissed in the holistic review. So, I think this is where we have to look at the bigger picture and then weigh the different priorities and do the risk assessment and do the community consultation and get much more input. And I'm not dismissing those people 132 people signing a petition is not a small number. So indeed, I do recognise how those concerns are valid, but we do have other contesting considerations, and we've talked many years about that, as Councillor Powell and the Mayor would know. So I think it's an opportunity for us to be fair, to listen to those petitioners, but also to give that review process an open platform. We can't narrow it down in this particular instance. I think this is the right approach, and I support the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now might be a good time to test Councillor Johnston's amendment. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Johnston's amendment? Councillor Jones, thank you. Councillor Johnston, did you want to speak to the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My amendment basically is just an adaptation from the officer's recommendation that the Public Open Space Review investigates the feasibility of partial fencing or a natural barrier even along the northwest corners of Nicholson Road Reserve. So basically along Nicholson Road itself and potentially along Rockaby Road where there's already a hedge. But small dogs, small balls would be able to go from that park area onto the road. So there's it's already a dog park, an off-lead dog park. So it would make it safer. It would hopefully, I would like them to investigate the value that might add by enclosing it a little bit to make it more amenable, more attractive and appealing for other user groups and make it safer for cars and people using the park. It ties in with the council plan, Pillar 1 with connecting community and Pillar 2 with flourishing environment, inviting spaces. And it also, as it's been pointed out, we are perhaps short on green space, so it makes our space work harder. It still enables good access for pedestrians. So yes, I'm just asking that officers would take that into consideration in a holistic review. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it seems reasonable to me that with Nicholson Road being such a busy road, that there's consideration of some form of physical barrier between the green area and the road, not just for dogs, but small children. People run around. So I think as long as it doesn't block access and make it harder for people to get in and out, I'm happy to support this additional direction for the open space review.
Thank you. Were there any other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Kosovich, a question.
To the Director of Technical Services, if I may, please, Mayor. Thank you. My question is, what will the likely cost be of enclosing that part of the Palms, that is the Thomas Street, to prevent dogs running onto the road, as has been proposed in the amendment, please? And will that be an additional cost to the $200,000 that is proposed should we have a enclosed dog park somewhere else in Central Ward later on after the public review?
Thanks for the question. Director, Technical Services.
Thank you for the question and for you, presiding member. So it's a bit hard to give you a particular answer on that because obviously it's an investigation and obviously there's a few options proposed. So obviously it would range in costs. Obviously, if it were to greenscape it, I dare say it would be quite a bit more expensive, but obviously have slightly different amenity outcomes as opposed to just a more traditional fence. I might just ask, does the manager for Parks and Environment have anything else he wishes to add as far as a ballpark for any potential options?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, as the Director of Technical Services has already stated, there will be a number of options that we could look at in terms of enclosure, which would all come with different costs. In terms of a ballpark figure, those options would all have a lot of variety, so we won't provide that at this case, at this stage. However, those costs would likely come in addition if there were to be an additional fenced dog enclosure to be provided within the Central Ward. Those additional costs for Nicholson Road Reserve would be above that $200,000 figure.
Thank you. And if I'm understanding the advice correctly, just for abundant clarity, it's too early to say because I think the very thing Council's asking staff to do is investigate feasibility of the thing described. Good. Okay. Councillor John, another question. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, in terms of any mishaps or accidents where dogs have run onto Thomas Street in particular, have there been any incidents where that has happened to justify this, please?
Mr. Director.
Thank you for your question. Not that I'm aware of. Unfortunately, the manager for compliance would probably be best placed to answer that, but he's unavailable tonight. But not to my awareness. I've actually spoken to staff about Nicholson Reserve, obviously because it was raised at the briefing last week, and I wasn't aware of any incidents of that nature.
Councillor Johnston, I see your hand up. You've got limited options at the moment. Is it a question of some kind? Okay. What's the question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just in light of the previous questions regarding dogs running onto a Thomas Road, could you just clarify for everyone where the boundaries and the streets that abut or adjoin the off-lead dog park are? My understanding is it doesn't adjoin Thomas Street. If that could be clarified, please.
You're asking a question about a dog park, which doesn't exist.
I thought Councillor Kosovich was asking questions regarding Thomas Street.
My apologies. It's the existing off-league dog park that would be made an enclosed or partially enclosed dog park.
That's the.
Yep.
That's
Can you
exactly
describe
right.
the boundary, please, Mr. Hambley?
Thank you, and for you, presiding member. So yes, just to clarify, the area that's typically used and designated for off-lead dogs is actually the north west corner of the Nicholson Reserve. So the two main adjoining roads to that, as has been mentioned, is Nicholson to the north and Rockaby to the west, and it probably goes about halfway along the reserve each way before you've got already existing other natural features such as hedges and the like. So if there was to be fencing, that would be the likely location that would go. There probably wouldn't be anything near Thomas Street, which already has some fencing and other structures in its place.
Thank you for the clarification. And again, have there been many mishaps?
Hang on, Councillor Kosovic. Okay, we'll just approach this in an orderly fashion. I see Councillor Johnston's hands down, and this is why I don't like questions at council meetings. But I take it from what you just started to say that you've got a further question, Councillor.
My apologies, Mayor. I should have did the courtesy of putting that to you in the first place. Thank you. Yes, obviously the follow-up is, Thomas Street is out as a possibility, though a dog could still run from there onto Thomas Street. But Nicholson Road, there's been no mishaps or accidents where dogs or anyone else has come to a sad end there, please.
Mr. Hambley.
Thank you. Not that I'm aware of, but again, if we were to investigate, obviously we'd investigate all those matters as well as part of that.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, anyone wanting to speak to the amendment? Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, I do. I think I have to say this is a case where I don't believe there's a necessity to do the micro deciding of where we do our feasibility studies. I think it's too early for that. I think that's the point about having a holistic review. The problem with the limitations of that is that we start to shape a view that this is going to be where the dog park goes, or this is not going to be. And I think there could be some moving parts here that we just haven't even really thought of yet. I see no necessity for there to be the micro focus on one area when there may be another suitable area, or it may be determined through that process that the existing arrangements have to stand. But I do understand there is a sense of urgency in the community. But we have to weigh that up, as I said in my initial response, to the wider concerns that we have limited, active, open green space for our community, and how we use that has to be fairly considered against other considerations. Now, whether that fencing off means that, it's primarily, I haven't even got an idea on size, but I know that the office has made it really clear that the studies and about enclosed dog parks that are too small are actually not a positive outcome for the community. They can bring increased risks, higher potential for severe dog-on-dog incidents, amenity impacts. They're hugely costly because of the rapid surface degradation. But this isn't the reason we would not support one. My concern is that we need the holistic review before we do the feasibility studies discussion. I think we're putting the horse before the cart, and I didn't want to make that pun about the dog tail wagging the dog, but it just keeps coming to mind. But no, we're not doing that. But you do appreciate. I think it's important that all options are on the table. That's how I feel. So I don't support the amendment at this point, but maybe I can be persuaded if someone has a strong argument.
Any other speakers? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Mullen. I support the amended motion. I was interested to learn how many dogs there are in the Central Ward and appreciate what a valued part dogs are in the lives of our residents. While I appreciate the desire of the petitioners for a fenced-off dog park in Central Ward, I feel that the use of our open space does need to be looked at holistically, as others have said. We're a densely populated inner city area, and density is going to increase in key areas of Subiaco in coming years. So it is important that we take a long-term strategic view on how our open spaces are used, as they're inevitably going to have to work harder over time, particularly with the increase in apartment living, where residents don't have their own open space. I support the amended recommendation that partial fencing or natural barriers are considered as part of the public open space review in relation to Nicholson Road Reserve, but I do hope that that is just one of a range of creative options and solutions that are part of the conversation about the use of all our public open spaces when we get to that point.
Thank you. Further question? Oh, I suppose you haven't. I might just ask a question before you speak. It's It's on the tip of my tongue. It's for Director Technical Services. I suppose I just want to gauge the staff's understanding of this amendment. Does it suggest a particular outcome? Suppose Council carries this amendment. Is it the case that you would interpret that as meaning that the Council is endorsing or asking you to install partial fencing at the dog park?
Thank you for the question. So, no, I guess, and I've obviously worked with Councillor Johnson in preparing this. Obviously, it's pretty clear that it's asking to investigate in the first instance, so it's not committing to anything. And it's very clear as far as looking at the feasibility of it. And obviously, there has been comments made about competing priorities, which will be considered. And obviously, that's why it's ideally placed to be part of that open spaces review and weighed up against amenity and other considerations. So I don't think it's locking the city into any particular course of action, but it's just making it clear that that is to be considered as part of the open spaces review amongst other options that could be considered for Nicholson Reserve.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought that both Councillor De Vries and Councillor O'Connor have raised very good issues on this, and I like to consider where they're coming from, and I'd like to be fair to the amendment as well, and particularly I'd like to be fair to dog owners who are looking for protection. However, I am concerned that we are jumping the gun before the public open space review, and I would ask that take the assurance given to us by the Director of Technical Services, but I still want to make sure we're not having a double dip here and paying for 2 lots of fencing at different locations. That's my primary concern and primary objection to this. Thank you.
Any other speakers? No. Hands down. Do you want to speak to the amendment, Councillor Powell? You don't have to.
Oh, no, I will, very briefly.
Thank you.
Look, I think I will be supporting the amendment because I think it is just direction to say, well, look at this when you're doing the open space review, and I think that's pretty clear from the officer comment that it will be considered holistically, in the long-term needs of the community. So I can't see any real problem with it.
Thank you. I'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, the amendment's carried 5-2, and we'll return to C5 per the officer recommendation as amended. So far, we've heard from the mover and the seconder of the substantive item. So that was Councillor Kosovich and Councillor De Vries. Looking for any other speakers to speak to the item as now amended. Okay, I will ask Councillor Kosovich if you'd like to close. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of C5? C5's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And now we can move on to C6, Local Government Reform Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. We've got the officer recommendation, no special voting requirements, but an amendment submitted by Councillor Jones. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation? Councillor De Vries, thank you, and Councillor O'Connor. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, I support the officer recommendation. Thank you.
You support it too, Councillor O'Connor?
Yes, I support the officer recommendation.
Okay, I'm just wondering how much debate we need to have about the amendment. I'll look for a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Jones is presumably still going to move the amendment which you've submitted, so thank you for that. Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Kosovich, thank you. Councillor Jones, speaking on the amendment only at the moment.
I'll be brief. The changes to the Local Government Act now allow the City to provide reasonable remuneration to the independent members on this committee, which will help us to attract high-quality candidates. However, now that local governments are required to have 2 independent members rather than 1, and one of those must be the presiding member on the committee, it's likely that demand for independent members is going to increase. It's therefore important that the City has flexibility to provide additional incentives to potential candidates, and this amendment seeks to do that by providing reimbursement for expenses subject to council approval, of course.
Thank you. Councillor Kosovic.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I had an email exchange during the week with Councillor Russell over this. Councillor Jones. And I am satisfied with the explanation that he provided. And look, we need to have independent community members qualified, and we need to obviously incentivise them coming onto specialist committees like the audit and risk. So, yes, I support that on those lines.
Any other speakers for or against the amendment? Councillor De Vries.
I support the amendment.
Any other speakers? Okay, I'll call the vote on the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, the amendment's carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll remove to the substantive C6 as amended. I'll take any other speakers apart from Councillor De Vries or Councillor O'Connor being the mover and the seconder. Okay, probably not a lot to close on. Councillor De Vries, did you want to take the opportunity? No. I'll call the vote on C6 as amended. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's carried unanimously. Right, that's the end of the open agenda. Noting that the elected member motion previously submitted by Councillor Johnston is no longer going to be moved. There's no urgent business that's been brought to my attention. So, councillors, I will look to you for a mover and a seconder on a procedural motion to close the meeting to the public pursuant to sections 5.232A, C and E, Roman numeral 3 of the Local Government Act, while items 13.1, 13.2 and 13.3 are considered. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Kosovic moving and Councillor Jones seconding. All those in favour of the procedural motion? Right, that's carried unanimously. So we'll now go behind closed doors. Thank you to those still watching. Okay, I confirm that council's carried on block. So I confirm that council has carried a number of confidential items this evening, which I'll read out now. Agenda item 13.1. To proceed with the major land transaction as proposed in the business plan in attachment 1. On agenda item 13.2, proceed with the major land transaction and major trading undertaking as proposed in the business plan in attachment 1. Agenda item 13.3, that firstly the CEO performance review for 2024-2025 is endorsed and the CEO performance criteria for 2025-26 are adopted as recommended by the CEO performance review panel at attachment 1. Secondly, CEO Cameron's salary is increased by 4% inclusive of super for 2025-2026. And thirdly, the CEO employment contract at attachment 2 is modified to reflect the changes proposed at attachment 3. And finally, at agenda item 13.4, which was part of the en-bloc vote carried right at the start of the meeting, it was resolved that the city enter into a lease with Realside 388 Hay Proprietary Limited, consistent with the terms contained in this report and otherwise on terms acceptable to the city. So that brings us to the end of the agenda. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, staff. I declare the City of Subiaco Ordinary Council meeting closed at 6:52 p.m. Thanks, everyone.